Guys, let's get started. So our software engineer, Angie Yegi is here and he'll be introducing himself. So over to you.
All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Anj. I'm a software developer at Google at the moment, and I worked at Amazon for a few years. And before that, I worked at Citigroup and studied at U of T. And that's who I am.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you get us started with the event? We'll just wait for the other speaker to join us.
All right. I mean, what do you want me to talk about or cover, I guess? Because I can talk about anything.
Yeah, how about maybe just like starting with the resume and how to get the interview and how to kind of ace the interview. And if you have any tips or anything that you did that would help us.
All right, sure. So unfortunately, I am sort of prevented from discussing specific details of the Google interview process as per my contract, but I can talk about sort of the generic advice that I think that will help people when you're trying to get a job. I think the most useful thing by far is to have some level of practical experience. So and I also, so when I worked at Citigroup, I also did a lot of recruiting as well. I've seen like thousands of resumes in my time. And probably the thing that I've seen that is missing the most is people don't seem to show the real experience that they have. Like if I go to your GitHub, for example, if you have your GitHub linked on your resume, which I think that you should, if I go to your GitHub, I want to see something that's not just class projects. I know that you guys are probably still in school, but try to do some stuff outside of class that really pushes your abilities, because otherwise you kind of just end up looking like everyone else, and it's difficult to stand out if that's the case. So yeah, try to do stuff outside of class. In terms of a resume, just keep it to like one page. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. One thing that I would advise to do is, as much as it is very tempting, don't exaggerate or put stuff that's like not really real. Just keep it like realistic, because any recruiter is going to be able to tell the difference between something that's actually real and something that you've exaggerated. So just keep it basic. It doesn't have to be anything extremely impressive or anything. Just have to seem like a reasonable, motivated person. And yeah, make sure to keep it to one page. I know I already said that, but this is, a lot of people have like 2 or 3 page resumes, and it just makes things more complicated usually. And yeah, I guess after you put in the application, or maybe you talk to a recruiter and end up in the interview process, I can't really discuss the specifics of the interview process, but what I will say is the most important thing for any interview at any company is probably going to be your attitude. This is where I see like most people fail. Even if you are able to solve the questions that are asked of you, if it seems like you're like in your head a lot, or you get very upset with yourself or something like that, I mean, the expectation is that you're going to be pushed a little bit outside of your comfort zone of the interview to solve the problem. Just have to remain calm, cooperate, or collaborate with your interviewer as much as possible. Just seem like a person who is not deterred by technical challenges. That'll reflect very positively on your potential as a good software developer. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just like generic advice that I would give, I guess. I could talk about like more specific things if you want, but that's sort of like, my impression of the entire process.
Yeah, you can maybe talk about a little bit about the behavioral interview and the technical interview and how they're different and what approaches would be better for each of them.
Okay. So I would say that they're actually not that different. It's a little bit deceptive in certain ways, because in both of them, your behavior is really what is being interviewed for the most part. Your ability to solve technical problems to some degree is also going to be covered. But I think ultimately the most important thing that they're going to be looking for is, are you able to collaborate with someone? Are you able to take direction, or yeah, like can you work with someone else to actually solve a problem? In terms of the actual technical abilities, this depends highly on where you're applying. But let's say that you're applying at like a typical company that looks for, standard leak code type problems. The ability to actually solve those problems is important, but this is really not a difficult thing to learn. It's basically, if you do enough practice, you can pick it up fairly easily. And there's kind of like an expectation that you're at least able to solve them, but at the same time, they will probably ask a question that will be more difficult than the others, and there isn't really necessarily an expectation that you'll be able to give a complete answer to it. So how you react to that is very important. So yeah, like I think my advice kind of remains the same for both. You really just want to show that you're interested in learning, you're a very motivated person, and you're able to collaborate with people. And of course, you have a baseline ability to write clean code and solve the leak code problems. This is the easy part, in my opinion. But yeah.
Can you share any tips about how you kind of prepared for the event? I mean, for the interviews?
So I had a very specific way of learning the like leak code type problems. So my process, I guess, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do this, but this is just how I did it. So I chose mainly like medium level. You don't necessarily have to practice too many hard questions because they don't usually come up in interviews. So you want to study like easy to medium level questions. I did around 300 of them. This is maybe a little bit overkill, but that's just the number that I did. And I think the most important thing is when you practice those kinds of questions, make sure to do it on a timer. A lot of people kind of like skip that step, but I think it's really important. You should be able to solve like medium questions in like 20 minutes because that's usually the amount of time that will be given in an interview typically. I mean, well, that's kind of like an obvious statement, though. I mean, no interview is going to be longer than an hour typically, and usually half of that is going to be reserved for a technical question. So you want to make sure that you're able to solve it within that time comfortably. So yeah, just do a bunch of questions, time yourself, and try not to like skip to the solution too quickly. Like you have to suffer through it a little bit. And yeah, but don't like if you're spending like 5 hours on a question, then it's probably not worth, wasting too much time on it. But as much as possible, try to have like a complete solution and try to do it within 20 minutes or so.
If the audience has any questions, you can unmute and ask, or you can send it in the chat too. But just to get the ball rolling, is there any way you can kind of stand out in a technical interview?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, that's a question for you, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so standing out in a technical interview. It's a good question. I think probably the easiest way to stand out, it also depends on your interviewer. Like, this is one of the things that makes preparing for interviews very difficult is even in companies with a very structured interview process, every interviewer is going to be different. So, and they usually have sort of free reign on how they want to conduct their interview and what they want to ask. So it's difficult to prepare specifically. Some interviewers will be very interested in what you have listed on your resume, and they will ask you questions about them. So a lot of times what will happen is people will list a bunch of stuff that they vaguely know about on their resume, just in an attempt to like pad it out. This causes a problem with those kind of interviewers because they will ask you about it. And if you don't know about it, then it obviously doesn't reflect very well on you. So one way that you could stand out is make sure that everything on your resume you are very comfortable with, and be prepared for any kind of question about anything that is on your resume. So if you claim to know something on your resume, be prepared to answer a question, a very detailed question about that topic, because a lot of interviewers like to do that. Another thing that you can do is, as I was saying before, if you have projects outside of your classes, like open source repos on your GitHub, some interviewers will ask you about those, and those will help you stand out as well. But yeah, I mean, in general, a lot of them are pretty much the same. You just kind of want to answer the question, ask a lot of questions, and just try not to be silent. I know this is kind of one of the more unintuitive things, but like when you're writing code, typically most people, as far as I know, don't like talk to themselves as they're writing code. But in an interview, the interviewer is probably going to want to see that you are, asking questions, talking out your process. This will make things like a lot easier for you, I think. Yeah, I think I see some questions. I can answer those if you want.
Yeah, so the first question we have is, how do we get better at developing the algorithms for lead code style problems?
Yeah, so the thing about lead code is that the reality is that they're pretty much all the same. I know it doesn't seem that way, but when you do a few hundred of them, trust me, they're literally all the same. It's not that complicated. I mean, I don't really like the fact that they're asked so often in interviews, but it's just practice, in my opinion. Just spend like a few hours for a few weeks, a few hours a day for a few weeks, and you'll find it a lot easier, I promise.
Thank you. The next question is, how many rounds of interview are there for technical and non-technical positions?
I don't know about non-technical positions, but for technical positions, it depends on your level. And I think it also depends on the company. So sometimes, and it also depends on how, it depends on whether, like, it depends on a lot of things, but let's just say, like, on average, you can usually expect to do some sort of phone screen. And then after, you might do like a full day of interviews, and that could be it. Sometimes they'll skip the phone screen. And sometimes they'll add a few interviews, or sometimes they'll do a follow-up interview. It kind of depends, but on average, you can expect like 2 stages of interviewing.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, can we expect system design type problems for SWE internship roles?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I know that for some companies that I interviewed at, there was no systems design question, even for non-internship positions. Sometimes there is, but usually there's only one of them out of all of the questions that they ask. So you should still prepare for it, but I can't say for sure whether you'll encounter one or not.
Okay, the next question is, should the skills or technical skills section of your resume be short bullet points or full sentences?
This depends on personal preference, I would say. I think that in the back of your mind, whenever you're writing a resume, it's not that important to fixate on specific rules, but instead you should fixate on how can I communicate this information to whoever's reading it as efficiently as possible. So like, for example, when I used to do recruiting, we would take back like an entire stack of resumes from the recruiting event, like the on-campus events and stuff like that. And HR will have to go through like thousands of them. So you want to get the main points across as efficiently as possible. How it's formatted is not something that most people are going to care about. Like, you have to just imagine you're in a room, the table is just filled with resumes, and you're just trying to figure out like who's qualified for the role and who is not qualified for the role, or who has the right amount of experience, that kind of thing. So whether or not it's in sentences or bullet points, I'm not going to notice probably if I'm going through like hundreds of resumes. Most people probably wouldn't. So just try to focus on making sure that the entire resume looks consistent and you get your point across in an efficient fashion.
Just along those lines, a follow-up question. Is there anything specifically that your eyes are drawn to as soon as you look at a resume?
Um, I don't know. It depends on how that resume is designed, I guess. Like some people use that for effect, I guess. But maybe, so are you asking like, is there something that I immediately look for in a resume? Like okay, so maybe that's a different question. Um, it depends on, so if I'm looking for to fill an internship role, typically what I've seen is people will immediately jump to your university section, because you'd be surprised how many resumes come in from people that are not actually studying computer science, but they want like a computer science position. So you're just trying to like filter out people like that or applications like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, you just want to highlight the basic stuff. I go to this school, I study this thing, I'm in this year. Make sure to put what year you're in, because this is also a thing that um, a lot of people look for, because it depends on the context, of course. But yeah, the sort of main information, I think, is what most people would look at first.
Okay. The next question that we have is, what types of projects should I do to prepare for SWE intern roles and or get interviews for the roles?
So my suggestion would be do anything, like just do anything. Literally anything is better than nothing, and most people have nothing. So if you can just do something, and when I say something, it's very important that you follow through with the entire project. So I don't remember where I read this, but I read somewhere that doing half a project is even worse than doing nothing at all, because now you don't have anything to show for yourself and you've wasted a bunch of time. So ideally, what you want to do is choose something that you're interested in, do a project around that. And it could literally be anything. Like you can make a website that is just a timer app or something. If you follow through the entire process and it's actually done and usable, that's already more than a lot of people have. So yeah, just choose anything that interests you, follow through on the project, finish it, and make it polished and available on your GitHub. Then that'll be perfect.
A follow-up to that question, would you say the technical skills used in a project or the impact of the project are important, like how reusable or practical it is?
Making something that is very usable and practical is good, but I wouldn't say that it's a necessity. Um, Especially like if you're trying to get an internship role, no one is really expecting to see like this huge project with a lot of forks on your GitHub or anything like that. You mainly just want something that if I open it and look at it, is the code like decently formatted? Does the application actually work as intended? Stuff like that. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's necessary that it actually has a lot of impact. It's good if it does, but I wouldn't say that it's necessary.
Okay. And the next question that we have is, how important is a cover letter when applying? Or should everything be conveyed in the resume and cover letters are not required / recommended?
This also depends on the context, and it also depends on where you're applying to. Um, like I I don't know if I can really comment on this, because I haven't applied to every company that's ever existed, so I don't know like every process. But in the sort of recruiting campaigns that I've seen, I think resumes are typically more important. If you're applying for a very specific role at a smaller company and you want to make yourself stand out as someone who's very interested in that role, cover letter might be a good idea. In general, though, I think resumes are probably more important. But yeah, it's highly context dependent, I would say.
Okay, sounds good. The next question that we have is what topics are good to ask about during an interview?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What topics are good to ask about during an interview? I think they mean like
Okay.
when you have to ask questions, what type of questions should you ask?
Right. I feel like I probably violated this rule so my opinion is if you don't really have a question, then you don't really have to ask one. Like you don't have to ask a question if you're really like not curious about something. If you are curious about something, then I would say definitely ask a question. But if you don't have any questions, then you just don't have any questions. And I've never really like forced myself to ask a question if I didn't have one. If you wanted to sort of prepare in advance, I would say just look up the company that you're applying to beforehand, um, and just see like just yeah, like try not to formulate the question during the interview because that might just distract you a little bit. Just kind of look into the company beforehand. Think of like one or two interesting questions that you could ask during the interview, like, oh, I noticed this on your company website, or I noticed that you make this product. Can you tell me more about something to do with it? I don't know, like it, whatever interests you really, but I wouldn't stress about it. But yeah, it's just my opinion, of course.
So just to follow up, so you don't think it's like necessary to ask questions at the end of an interview?
I wouldn't say that it's necessary. I would say that again, this is just the approach that I've used. So take it with a grain of salt, of course. But I've done a lot of interviews where I just didn't have any questions, or I just couldn't think of any questions, and I just didn't ask. I just said, or I just find like something else to talk about. Interviews are a very people I think underestimate the personal nature of interviews. Like interviewers, a person too, they have a job, they've been in interviews themselves. Sometimes I ask questions about them, or I ask them like, how do you like your job? Or what do you think about the company that you work at? So I think if you can like engage the person that you're talking to, that's always a good thing to do. You can ask about like, you know, within reason, of course, but you can ask them questions about uh, how they enjoy their role or how they got to where they are right now. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it was necessary. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is when doing projects, is it important to showcase an impact? What if I have something that I worked on because I thought it was cool?
Yeah, that's fine. I've worked on a lot of useless projects, um, and I think that it's one of the best ways to learn. But um, yeah, so don't be deterred by the fact that it's not useful. If you're interested in it and it like helps you become a better programmer, then I would suggest you should do it. That's my suggestion anyway.
The next question is, you stress the importance of side projects. Would part-time academic research with a large programming component fall under this category? Many research projects do not get uploaded to GitHub due to confidentiality issues.
Yeah, I mean, any practical experience that you have is good. So obviously, not all of them fall under, the open source domain. So you can't take something that you worked like I can't take the code that I worked on in Amazon, just upload it to my GitHub. This is obviously not how it works. Um, but practical experience like this is something that you should definitely list on your resume, and it will definitely help you. Um, I would try to avoid mentioning class projects in a resume. The reason why I say that is because almost everyone does this. And the thing is like you're forced to do, like you have to do it anyway to actually complete your class. So it doesn't really help you to stand out. But if you have a specific like research experience, or you've made a project outside of class, I think those are definitely things that are worth listing on your resume.
We have one more question, and then our recruiter joined, so we'll pass it over to him. Is that okay?
Sure.
Is deploying the project important? For example, what if I build a website that hasn't been hosted yet? Can I just have a link to the GitHub repo?
I would say that having it be accessible is definitely good. Like if you can do that, that would be ideal. But it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to do that to that extent. Like for example, let's say that you have an application that you made and it's just like a local application. It's not a web, it's not hosted on the web or anything. Even just like uploading a video on YouTube or something and linking to that from your GitHub repo just to show that it actually exists. That's a lot more useful to someone who is looking through your stuff than just looking through code. Because if I'm looking through code, I can kind of understand what's going on, but I have no idea if it works at a high level. So yeah, I mean, if you can host your website, that's great. If you can take a screen share or like a screen capture of your application working and upload a demo to YouTube, that's also very good. So try to demonstrate it in a understandable way as much as you can.
We'll take one last question and then we'll move on. I'm
Okay.
currently doing an internship, but I don't have anything big to talk about. Is this a bad thing? And in addition to that, should I even put this on my resume? If so, how would I present it?
As in, should you even put your internship on your resume, or the fact that you like as in just because you should definitely put your internship on your resume. But so I've seen this kind of pattern. Sometimes people don't really notice that they're working on things. Like, I mean, obviously you go into work on a daily basis to do your internship, so you must be doing something. The trick is to sort of identify how you can communicate what it is that you do to other people. And this can be tricky sometimes. And this is why it's important. Something that I've noticed is that after you've completed a job or an internship, it's difficult to think back and be like, what did I even do at this job? Because you forget sometimes. When you're actually in the job, try to take a note of, this is how I impact the organization. This is how I contribute to my team. These are the important achievements that I've made during the 3 or 4 months that I've been doing this job. That'll help you a lot when you put it on your resume, but definitely put it on your resume. I'm sure you can find something. I'm sure you can find something that you've done. Even bug fixes. You can be like, I enhanced this program. I reduced error rates by 50%, whatever. I mean, like, don't exaggerate it, but just be honest. Like you can even put that I committed lots of bug fixes. That's a useful thing to do. It's definitely not a useless by any means. So just try to identify what it is that you do. Definitely put it on your resume.
Thank you so much. We'll just move on to the recruiter and then we'll come back if we have any questions. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So the recruiter who has joined us today is Jeff, and he is currently working at Google, and he's also the founder of Boba Talks. I'll give it over to him to introduce himself. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Always gotta ask that great question. So yeah, it's nice to meet you all. Sorry for being late. I recorded the time wrong. Yeah, so my name is Jeff. I am currently a recruiter over at Google. And I'm also the founder of my own nonprofit. It's called Boba Talks. My nonprofit focuses on helping college kids kind of navigate their early career space through just connecting them with mentors, consultants, people who can kind of answer the hard questions that sometimes they're not able to find so easily. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I have a cute little presentation that I can kind of just share if you guys want to see it. But yeah, happy to get started. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. The stage is all yours.
Awesome. Could I get the screen share, please?
Yeah, one second.
Awesome. You're about to see my computer. All right, welcome to my cute presentation that I made during my stand-up today. Yep, definitely was working on hard stuff. So a little bit about me. I have a very interesting career history. I am a college dropout. An amazing time in my life. Just didn't do well in school. I actually failed my CS 142 class, and that was like the really biggest driver of me dropping out. And it kind of taught me a lot of life lessons about what I should be doing. Um, it taught me a lot of the support systems in college that I felt like kind of failed me. And it also humbled me to realize like, wow, I really have to get kind of my life together. And then ever since then, my career has always been fluctuated. I worked at some pretty awesome companies. My previous company before Google was Amazon, where I recruited for software engineers for about, I want to say like 2.5 years. So that's where I got a majority of my recruiting experience from. And right now I recruit for Google for product managers. So I have a pretty good balance. And then outside of product and outside of SWE, I also previously recruited for big data and for cloud. So I have a pretty good spectrum of most of the tech space except for design. And then for nonprofit stuff, it started as a passion project. It started at Amazon, and it really was focused on helping college kids, university kids, kind of just navigate the ambiguities that kind of come with trying to get your life together right after graduation, how to apply to internships, how to network, how to connect, how to do the behavioral, how to do the tech interviews. And that's why my Boba Talks exist, just so it can be kind of a safe space for our students to ask whatever kind of questions they want. It's about 2.5 years old. I'm really happy about it growing in the size it is today. But yeah, anyways, not the best public speaker in the world, by the way, but I'm here today because I want to talk to you guys about internships, about how to apply, what they look like on my end, and answer any questions along the way. I can't see the group chat, by the way, so if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and I'm sure someone will tell me to stop talking so I can answer it.
Yeah, I'll point all the questions to you.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about internships. So internships, amazing, valuable opportunities for you to get real life corporate experience while you're still in school. Very, very well sought after, incredibly value for your resume, and most importantly, probably the biggest piece of data that you can probably use to get into a new grad role. By nature, most internships are seasonal. Structure-wise, they are seasonal by quarter. Most companies structure their internships by quarter, and some companies have certain quarters that they are where they are active in, and other quarters where they're not active in, which is the definition of a quarterly system. Why is this important? Is because the quarters that they are active are quarters that they don't act, are quarters that we don't actively recruit, and vice versa. The quarters that we do recruit, they're not usually active in. So for example, at Amazon, the SWE internships are active during summer and they are active during spring, but they are not active during fall and they are not active during winter. So during spring and summer, typically the idea is that you are working on your internships, and during fall and winter, you're working on your resume so you can apply into these internships. So it's kind of a cool cycle, yeah? Most internships are region locked, but I know that I'm talking to a lot of Waterloo students right now. I think almost all Waterloo students. So I just want to kind of get this big question out of the way about Canadian students applying to American internships. No worries. All of F500 plus most of FAANG have Canadian counterpart internships that are available to domestic Canadian residents. Oh, fun fact, I'm a dual citizen. I'm from Calgary. Go Flames. Yeah, so how do internships work? Yeah, give me a quick second. Did I explain this already? Done. Perfect. Okay, so how do internships work? All right, so they work like this. Pretend my director gave me an assignment that, Jeff, you have a budget of $1 million. And my job is to hire 100 interns for my org. I'm like, all right, I can definitely do that. So if I'm to hire 100 interns and my budget is $1 million, that means I have $10,000 per seat and I have 100 seats available. Why is this important? It's because it's about volume and it's about vacancy. Once my 100 seats are filled, regardless of whoever the 101st candidate or student applies into my role, no matter if it's some Harvard genius, child prodigy, or whatever, once these 100 seats are filled, I no longer am looking for interns, right? And that's kind of how it works. So with 100 seats in my mind, my job is to fill all 100. So let's say I open my internships at the start of January. That means the very first application that hits my inbox to like all the way to the end, I'm reviewing each intern one by one, right? And whether they're a fit or not doesn't really matter to the situation, because as long as they have my programming languages, as long as that they're in the proper matriculated grade, as long as they're in the proper region, they're very likely going to get a OA or a technical assessment, whatever people call them nowadays. They do the assessment, they get the interviews, they ace the interviews, they accept the offer, and then the seat is filled. And now I have 100 seats, now I have 99 seats. Multiply all of that and factor in the fact that there are multiple internship recruiters or early career recruiters, and there are multiple people reviewing this giant volume of tens of thousands of students, and we have limited seats. Basically, once all seats are filled, we're done, and we're no longer reviewing students. We're no longer reviewing OAs, all that good stuff. There's some other like factors of having a wait list, of referrals, that all do play a pretty big factor. But for the most part, all you need to know is that all internship systems are built on vacant seats. Once they're all filled, we move on. We're done with that quarter, and we kind of work on building out a system, or we work on improving our systems for the following quarter. All right. Any questions about how internships work real quick? I know I kind of TLD on that one.
We don't have any questions so far, but I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So do you think it's better to apply earlier and kind of not edit your resume to suit that particular role, or it doesn't matter? Or like,
Fun fact, most SWE internships in F500 and in big tech are to a certain extent, they do want full stack programming languages, but for the most part, you're going to be focusing a lot on backend stuff. So for the most part, because of that, it's a very fungible internship. You don't have to tailor it for really anything, right? Because the definition of fungible means that as long as you know the programming language of choice, I'm able to take said intern, move them from, I don't know, Amazon Photos to, I don't know, like AWS or something. Because you have the language, you're relatively flexible. I just have to take you from one team to the other. You don't need to tailor your your resume to what we call a pooling rank, which is almost all internships. So my opinion is that you should always prioritize the time and applying early as possible. I think the biggest danger and the biggest red flag for a lot of students nowadays is that they are still working on their resumes when internship seasons start. You should be using the downtime during fall or of the previous quarter, using that downtime to work on your projects, work on your resume. So when internships open up, you're not hesitating to apply, you're not waiting for referrals, you're not waiting for feedback, you're already good to go. Because as my example was kind of shown, the first however many candidates kind of get in are the ones that get the seats first, because all recruiters work in chronological order. We don't prioritize referrals. We don't prioritize what we call like legacy students or legacy kids or anything like that. Most ethical recruiters and most ethical companies just work in chronological order. By the way, I don't want to scare anyone. Amazon, Google, all those big companies, we don't have 100 seats. We have like 10,000 seats. So this was just for my math, because I can't divide 1 million by 100 or something like that. Okay. So I don't want to scare anyone. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
yes, thank you so much. We have another question. So the question is, there's an example, but I don't want to read that out. But the question is, do you guys read the resumes in a queue or a stack?
In a QR stack? Maybe I should read them.
It comes in ABCD. Do you read it as ABCD or DCBA?
Oh, I see, a sample. Okay. The first one. It goes by time. This is gonna be a little bit nerdy, but it's really cool. So all companies have something called applicant tracking system. So think of it as a very fancy filing cabinet. Some filing cabinets are nicer than others. Some filing cabinets are absolutely dog water. What matters most is that different filing cabinets have different systems and different methodologies. For the most part, almost every single company works in a chronological order. So whoever asked that question, it would be scenario A, because scenario A has timestamps, and we kind of work in timestamp order. And the only thing that would ever throw this off would be referrals or returnships, but we don't have to kind of get into that. What would you? Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. There are more questions now. So would you like to take them now or?
Let's go. No
Okay.
worries.
How would you keep, actually I missed one question before. So do you and our recruiters click on GitHub links or view linked projects?
Not every recruiter, truth be told, although, to be absolutely transparent, I'm a technical recruiter. So although I don't come from a technical background, I do know enough about programming to like go into a GitHub, look at a repository and be like, oh, okay, this person's background clearly is Python because the majority of the projects here are written in Python, or they're all written in React, et cetera, et cetera. In university recruiting, your background isn't always technical. So I can't promise you that every recruiter will go through GitHubs or repositories. What they will go through are the projects that are present on the resume, because the philosophy for university recruiting is that whatever is on your one-page resume is what they review. You're going to hear a stereotype that's super mean, but kind of true, that recruiters only look at resumes for like 6 to 20 seconds. And as much as I hate that stereotype, it is an unfortunate truth for such a high volume space that is internship recruiting. Your recruiters are very unlikely to be opening up GitHub if they already have 2 or 3 examples of your projects, which you kind of should have on your resume. So they'll mostly go through that, which is why it's really important for on your resumes, your projects should talk about what its purpose is, if it improved any type of metric, what kind of languages are you using, any kind of frameworks. Yeah. Sorry, I was really late to this meeting, so I'm kind of like catching my breath, but that was a really good question.
Thank you for your answer. The next question is, how would you keep track of all the recruiting seasons for the different companies?
Oh, that's really easy if you want to see a cool thing. So it's kind of cool, but I'm trying to build something out. It would be kind of cool if there was an app for this, but I personally have a tracker that it's basically the FAANG, the F500, some startups. But the idea is that you always minus 9 months. So if you're applying to summer 2023, you know that the applications are going to be opening 9 months ahead of time. With that being said, not every company has the best university recruiting team, so it's not always consistent. But for F500 and for FAANG, the general cadence has almost always been apply to it 9 months ahead of time. You have a grace period about a month, maybe a month and a half to 2 months of leeway, just so you can still be at like top of the line. But yeah, that's the general gist. Yeah, I hope, did that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
Didn't get a reply, so I guess.
I'll link it to you guys. Maybe that will be a much better thingy-majig. Yeah. All right. So moving on, what kind of recruiters do you need? Kind of go back. So as I'm a technical recruiter, I work with technical roles, specifically mid-level and senior level up. It is really unfortunate that I don't work with interns or new grads, because the recruiters that work with interns and new grads are people called university recruiters or new grad recruiters. You're going to see, I can actually show it to you right now, how to find them. So for example, good old Boolean strings, right? So let's say I'm looking for a university recruiter and I want them to find them at Google. So you would enter a Boolean into the LinkedIn little search bar, and boom, now you know that this recruiter works at Google and they work with internships. The only hard part is knowing whether or not that specific recruiter works on SWE internships, or does this university recruiter work on recruiter internships? That's the hard part. Finding the recruiters is not the hard part. Finding what they actually do for a living, that's the genuine hard part. And yeah, pretty cool, right? Boolean strings, recruiters use them too. Before I move on, I want to preface this with one more thing. I know that there are some Waterloo students who have a very deep fear of not securing internships because Waterloo, from my observation, has some of the craziest co-op programs I have ever seen in my life, and it's super stressful. I want you to know that if you can't secure an internship, it is not the end of the world. I am really privileged to say that I've hired SWEs for who have had like less than 1 or 2 internships in America. And because of the nature of Waterloo's super aggressive co-op program, you have a bunch of more than 1 or 2 internships. So you're in good water. But if you don't, no worries, because there are other things you can do to offset that data. Because at the end of the day, that 1-page resume, it's all about data that presents you as a strong candidate. So what other things can you present? You can do projects, preferably in OOP languages, so like Python or Java or something. That would be really ideal because just the majority of the market out there right now and the products that they work in are honestly in Java or in Python. If you do work in front end, or you want to work in front end, or you want to come off as a full stack person, no worries. Maybe one project with React, because yeah, most products who have a website or work in front end tend to use React nowadays more than anything else. So that's a pretty good blend. Let's say you're good on projects. What else can you do? Hackathons are a really excellent way. They're free. They're super duper available, especially in a virtual climate. To do, you get to meet with a bunch of other comp sci students. You get to meet with designers. You kind of get to be in a pseudo environment of writing code, being in a project, having deadlines, having timelines, and kind of competing against other folks, because you can still add those projects to your resume. The lovely speaker, developer who was speaking before, who gave the advice, don't add projects that come from class. I'm gonna +1 that. I think the huge red flag is that if you add some type of ping pong table, Minesweeper type of project on your resume, because if you think about it, so will everyone else as default until they flesh out your projects. Your projects don't have to save the world. They don't need to fix the planet. They don't need to like make everyone happy. They just have to be relatively well thought out and well fleshed out. For example, and still my favorite example to this day, one of the projects on a L4 SDE that I was able to give an offer to actually focused on Pokemon. It was a very specific GitHub project that told me what kind of Pokemon I should be using when I invade someone else's Pokemon Go gym. It's really cool. I related to it a lot, and I liked it quite a bit. See, you don't have to fix the world, and they don't actually have to solve climate change or anything like that. All right, any questions before I move on to a PowerPoint that will focus on how to get selected for interviews?
Yes, there's actually a few questions. What if I'm working on a project that I think I can finish in maybe 1 or 2 weeks? Should I wait for the project to finish the project to add it to the resume and then apply? Or should I add it to the resume, apply, and then continue working on it?
Okay. So this is more gonna be a controversial, because I can honestly see this going 50-50. But my personal professional opinion has always been, if it's on your resume, it's fair game for me to review, and it's fair game for me to reject if it's not quality enough, right? Because that is the danger of putting something that is like 50% done quality-wise on a resume and then putting it up for scrutiny or criticism, or for me to review. It has always been my super unsugar-coated advice to students that you need to be using your downtime before internship season in a way to optimize your projects. I know that it is not the easiest thing in the world right now to balance school life and project life and all that good stuff, but it is your responsibility to have well fleshed out projects so you don't have to delay tinkering them, and which delays putting them on your resume, which will delay you applying to the roles. Because as I mentioned at the very beginning, the most important factor to internships has almost always been timing. So to answer your question, personally, I would wait until you finish and flush it out and then put it on your resume and then apply. And then if you need to make like small cosmetic changes, small quality of life that I can see through patch notes or whatever, that's totally fine. I'm just talking about like, don't put bare bones of like a Pokédex in your GitHub, put it on your resume, and then go back and completely change everything from the ground up. Get like 90% of it done, put it on your resume, and I will consider that completely fine. Good question.
The next
It's really
question.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, the question is, would having experience be better than side projects?
That's a really good question. So the deal is, as long as the experience is in your field of study, the answer is yes. So for example, TA experience counts, tutoring experience counts, internships obviously count. Even freelance work via Fiverr, via contracts, they all count and they do weigh a lot, almost equivalent to almost more than projects actually. However, the rule stops if we kind of saturate, I guess, the experience. So for example, if it's like part-time work or uh, like working at a grocery store, then versus having a project, then no, then the priority should go to the project. I say this with the caveat that, there's no such thing as a perfect student profile. If you work part-time, you should still put that on your resume if you don't have anything else to put, because, and we're going to talk about it later on this slide when we come to the extracurriculars, that there is valuable data that is received or interpreted when you put part-time work or anything else on a resume, right? So, yeah.
We'll do one more question and then we'll move on with the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question is, what type of resume do you recommend? Do you recommend the standard black and white straightforward style, or does making it look different help?
So my hill to die on has always been the only field that gets to have really pretty resumes are folks in design, specifically like UX, UI product design, or folks in marketing or graphic design. Those are the only two fields that I would ever like be comfortable with them being a little bit more creative with how their resumes are formatted and whatnot. For SWEs and interns and new grads, I've always encouraged the classic black, white Harvard resume. Super duper famous, super duper safe. You cannot get it wrong. It's just easier to read. You probably heard about this, but PDF files and, non-PDF, too flashy, too many graphics, headshots, they don't really do well with most ATSs. And this goes back to what I said earlier. Every company uses a different ATS to a certain extent. Most ATSs are really smart. They're really built out because strong engineers have accounted for, having a freaking picture on your resume, right? But some ATSs are absolutely dog water and they don't digest it really quite well. So because of that, the general rule has always been PDF file via black and white Harvard resume template, and you should be good to go. If you are curious about where to find said template, just Google Harvard template resume, and it will be your first or second. And then if you scroll down, you will see something right here. There is a specific SWE or comp sci one. I forgot what page it is, but it's somewhere here. And then you can just add it in. All right, let's move on to the next slide. How to get selected for an interview. So the most important thing is timing, the 3-month rule. I really want to get this one out of the way because it's the most important thing. You should not ever have, with consideration to F500 and above, you should never have an expectation that you will get an OA or a technical interview or a technical assessment if you apply within 90 days of the process, because within the 3-month rule of when the internship starts, you are competing against students who already received their interviews, received their offer letters. You're competing against folks who have also procrastinated. The team matching process of internships genuinely takes about 4 weeks. So you already lose 1 whole month due to like straight up internal systems and internal business operations. And then of those 2 extra months, you also have other internships you're also interviewing at. You have other offers to consider, and you have less time on the table to leverage other internships towards this one to increase your salary or your comp that you get. So the general gist has always been, if you are 3 months short of an internship season, it's probably best to have a little step back and focus a little bit more on backup plans. So more projects, more hackathons, part-time job, travel, whatever you want to do. The most important factor to getting an interview has almost always been timing, because I cannot repeat this enough. It doesn't matter how strong of a student you are, or whether you're Jeff Bezos's blood-born first son or anything like that. Once 100 seats are ethically filled out and they have offers confirmed, we can't do anything about opening up one more seat. We're going to get into a lot of gray area when it comes to referrals, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore that for now. But we can kind of get to it right after we talk about resumes. So what do all strong resumes ideally have? They will have projects. Typically, senior students should have about 3. It should be 2 back-end, or it doesn't have to be like necessarily back-end, but they just have to be written in a very convenient language. For example, at Amazon, the primary backend tech stack has almost always been like 90% of the products were Java, 10% were Python. It wouldn't really make sense if I hired someone explicitly who, I don't know, was really strong in PHP, really strong in C. But I also understand that once you know one language, it's relatively easy to jump to another. But again, 1-page resume, that's all the data I have. It would be a lot stronger for you to have projects that explicitly show that you work in a language that my company uses. So to kind of play the field, it's almost always better to just have 2 projects focusing on the most popular languages out there, to kind of just show recruiters like, hey, yeah, I know the language. We don't have to worry about that. And then to keep yourself full stack, 1 front end. React. Now, there's one more exception. You can, if you want to kind of get pretty, get into a niche, you can also be, you can do a mobile project, and it can be either Swift or Kotlin or whatever you want. But for the most part, it's almost always been 2-1 back end, front end, just to kind of give yourself a little bit more variety. I'm using the wrong English, but yeah, internships. Internships are the probably the most important thing. What should they all have? They should all have KPIs, which is just a fancy way to say metrics. They should all have impact, which should basically mean user change. And most importantly, they should all have programming languages. So frameworks or whatever you coded in should be at the very top, just so I can see some consistency. Tools, sure. And then finally, extracurriculars. So this can be part-time work, show collaboration. There should be hackathons to, guess what, show collaboration. This can be clubs to, guess what, just kidding. This should also show collaboration, but also shows leadership. And the reason why this is important is because we're only focusing on the technical part and the resume part. But when I'm going to talk on the next slide, there's 2 pieces of data that we look at. We look at the interview stuff, the data from a technical interview, and we look at the data from a behavioral interview. Don't get me wrong, I am sure your classes are super awesome and super fun, but I think you're going to get more leadership experience when you join, I don't know, a student club versus, I don't know, CS 142 in a lecture hall. That's just my opinion. So it's really important to have a really good, decent mix of both. And that's why I wanted to caveat what I said earlier, that there's nothing wrong with having part-time work or, working at a grocery store during college. We all have to eat. We all have to put money on the table. There's nothing wrong with that. There's just other priorities that should probably go there first. And then we can kind of talk about how to optimize the little cluster of part-time work on your resume to kind of just showcase to recruiters and HMs, yeah, I worked part-time and this is what I learned from it. Alrighty. That's everything on this slide. Are there any questions about resumes, referral? Oh, we didn't talk about referrals. I'm so sorry. The ways referrals work. Yes, referrals play a huge part with getting a job. When it comes to the internship space, it's a little bit grainy because almost everyone and their mom is able to secure an internship in 2020 after, right? It's not too hard. You have websites like Fishbowl, you have websites like Blind. You might have a friend, a new grad, and possibly like a family member who works in one of these companies able to give you a referral. If we even took this, let's say 10%, super low number, 10% of all applicants have referrals, and you multiply it in a high volume space of internships where there's more than 10,000 applicants and stuff like that, just based on region alone, that means I can't do math. That's like 100 1,000. I can't do math, but that's a lot of referrals to go through. And in that scenario, there's only 100 seats. Referrals don't mean like you get an instant seat. Referrals just mean like it's a guaranteed your resume is going to get reviewed by a person by hand. And that's essentially all that it is. Because in mid-level and up, referrals play a much, much bigger factor. But in a high volume space like internships, you can't justify, playing favorites, or just because an employee knows someone personally, that person gets priority over someone who applied first. And that's why things get a little bit grainy, because that philosophy I just said right there, not every company follows that practice. I am happy to say that I've worked at companies that don't play favorites and stuff like that, but I've also unfortunately sad to report that there are companies who do play favorites. Usually they're a little bit smaller, usually they're a bit more startup focused, and usually they're a little bit more fast paced. But for the most part, like just applying early is almost always infinitely better than getting a referral. Before I leave this part, I want to say one more thing. Do not get a referral during the internship season specifically. Secure a standing referral, but prior to the quarter. For example, if I want to apply to an internship in summer 2023, that means I need to be applying to said internship in September 2022. That means October, what's the month that goes, wait, what? I'm so stupid. August, July, and June are the 3 months I should be focusing on my resume, should be focusing on my projects, and focusing on securing a referral. That's what I mean about using your downtime before applying to an internship to secure everything you need to get. Because when September 2022 comes, you're first in line, you have a good resume, it's well fleshed out, it's well structured, it's been reviewed, and it's been updated to it's been min-maxed to the utmost degree, and you have a referral. The reason why it's a standing referral is because obviously there's only a time limit about how many referrals one person can have, and they can honestly remember. So just simply networking within the previous 3 months, just say, hey, blah, 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 I'm Jeff, I want to work for this company, I'd love to get your referral. Just say for the sake of the situation, the guy says, yeah, you have that person standing referral. It's time to apply. 2 weeks before you apply, you ping that person, you let them know, I'm gonna apply, I'd love your referral. Bing, dada, boom, you get the referral, you apply, and everything is groovy. Obviously, nothing ever happens according to plan, but that is an ideal situation. And the last thing I want to say are something called weighted referrals. So weighted referrals is this concept that some referrals from certain people are heavier than others, whether we think vertically in terms of seniority, or we think horizontally in terms of just having someone in the sake of a company. For example, a really popular opinion is that if you get a referral from a recruiter like me, that means you have great standing to get an internship at Google or at Amazon or whatever, where in truth, that is not the case. That means if you are applying for a recruiter internship, that would be absolutely the case, or a PM internship or whatever, that would be okay. But I don't know anything about SWE, so why the heck would my referral matter at all? That would be just a very generic, very generic, oversaturated referral, because a lot of other people are going to be thinking the same. Versus you getting a referral from another SWE who's on the actual team you're applying into, that's a different ballgame, and that's a completely different math right there. But you don't have to worry too much about it, because weighted referrals are not a huge thing in the internship space in F500 and up. Weighted referrals are more for folks around in the mid-level and up. So yeah, all right. That was a lot of information. I hope that there are questions, but feel free to ask.
There are, but we also want to get to the resume critiquing and reviewing.
Okay, no worries. Let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, we can finish the presentation and then we can move on to that.
Oh yeah, no worries. All right, so the next thing, yeah, no worries. So let's go ahead and just finish the prezi. So your interviews are going to be consisted of 2 things, technical interviews and then the behavioral interviews. To kind of keep short on time, the structure of the technical interviews is almost always focused on 2 core things. DSA, data structure and algorithm, and problem solving. You'll get an online assessment to do a leak code. That's usually hosted by some type of like assessment environment. HackerRank is probably the most popular one right now. And then you'll get a phone interview where you kind of talk to an interviewer. They normally sit down with you between 45 to 60 minutes. They give you a story problem, you solve it, boom, bada bing. And then you get the virtual on-site, so you get about a little bit more people, and they help evaluate you based on DSA, problem solving, and then the behavioral interviews. So I please ask me questions about the technical interviews. I'm super religious about helping people get through them, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip past this. Behavioral interviews are the second most important part, and please do not think that anyone who passes the technical interview absolutely gets the job. We have definitely failed plenty of students who've done incredibly well on the technical part, but they didn't have enough data on the behavioral part, because the behavioral part in 2022 is honestly almost as important as the technical piece. The behavioral interviews will come in two forms of data, mostly be past behavioral and future behavioral. So Amazon's really famous for asking past behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when, walk me through a situation where if you could go back and change anything, what would those type of questions, past behavioral questions of things you've already accomplished, versus a behavioral future-based interviews like Google, where we ask pseudo case study questions. Walk me through a solution where Spotify is going through an era where they're unable to connect in, I don't know, freaking South Dakota. How would you troubleshoot the problem? Or let's just say you and an intern are unable to collaborate on said project and its deadline's coming up in 2 weeks. What's the game plan to resolve that? Those type of interviews kind of focus on you walking me through your candidate logic, right? How you interpret the situation, how you break down the problem, what kind of variables and factors you take into account. I say this a lot, but it's not about what you say necessarily, but it's about why you say it and how you say it. You could give me a completely wrong answer to a certain degree, but walk me through it correctly where the logic is completely sound. And even if you arrived at the wrong conclusion, if your thought process is pretty sound, you're taking in account like variables, user experience, you get feedback from others, you do everything correctly, you still do pretty well. The last part before we do the resume reviews is something called STAR versus something called STAR Rail. STAR is a very common interviewing method that stands for situation, task, actions, and results. For interns, I have often found that if you tweak it just a little bit, you find better results. And the better format is called situation, task, actions, where it will take the biggest chunk of your story, and ALE, which is and I learned statements. The reason why and I learned statements are incredibly valuable to internships is because the one quality that we look for in the new grad intern space is coachability, something malleable. It tells me that you're able to take pause, stand back, receive feedback, receive criticism, reflect about a situation and experience, and then quantify that into an answer, and then tell me what that reflection was. This tells me that you can understand why that situation was important. You can tell me, that tells me what you learned from it, and that tells me how in the future you're never going to repeat those mistakes again. And I learned statements are absolutely critical in all internship interviews. And if you're not ending your behavioral statements with how you learned from a situation, it tells the interviewer that you're not like really reflecting and thinking critically about these experiences. All right, that was a lot said, and I promise I will absolutely go through the fire with you about answering technical interviews, but we should probably do some resume reviews. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and then you guys can do your thing.
Yeah, I can share my screen, and we just got a comment saying that can we have a part two for this event with Jeff to deep dive into interviews?
Absolutely. I just want to let you know that I cannot review code to save my life, but I will walk you through how you should answer code, because that I can do. All right.
So
All
this,
right.
can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah, so this is the first resume that we have.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's go ahead and go through this. So Betty Cooper has a LinkedIn, a GitHub, a website, an email, and a number. That is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with Betty Cooper's header. Education should definitely go on the very top for internships and new grad roles. That I do confirm, I can definitely believe in. It has been a somewhat established practice that we no longer express your start date of college. We only express when we graduate, because recruiters only need to know your end date to basically guesstimate what year you're in. And I have often found that a lot of students go through a lot of anxiety listing their start year and end year because it can be interpreted that they're going to like super senior status, and they think that that's a bad thing, which is not. But personally, I would just omit the beginning month and the beginning year. Relevant coursework is always fine, so long as that you have the data structure, the algorithm, and any math class. Honestly, the math classes, I feel like get a lot of brownie points. As long as you have DSA and math, I think those are the most important things. And then you have skill sets, which is good. Yeah, I think skills going second is a pretty good way. Programming languages and frameworks, we're good there. JavaScript, this person has the MERN stack. That's awesome. AWS for cloud, that's cool too. So we're good languages there. Okay, so let's kind of go to the nitty gritty. So this person worked at a big tech company. Awesome. They listed their Java. They worked with APIs. One thing I would criticize is that this is a really simple cosmetic change. It doesn't mean that whoever actually owns this resume is in any trouble or anything like that. I would personally bold all metrics just so it can kind of stand out. It kind of goes back to that recruiting philosophy that a lot of recruiters only spend 15 to 20 seconds reading a resume. Again, it sucks, but it's an unfortunate truth. So I personally say you might as well just kind of take advantage of that and bold the 80% satisfaction rate. And because you worked on an algorithm that filtered like 10,000 API results, you should probably bold that too. I know it sounds like a really simple change, but I cannot express enough like how superficial recruiters we have to be in order to read resumes at a high volume rate. So that would be my only criticism with the first bullet points. Honestly, I would probably move the third bullet point to the second bullet point, because if that was the intention of the internship, I kind of want to know that more than the results, just to give me more context. But it's not a real big hill I'm going to die on. And then medium-sized company security engineer, that's totally okay. Looks like they investigated crashes. Wouldn't it be decreasing? Oh no, increasing success rate. Yeah, you would increase the success rate. You'd bold that. This person listed the tools that they use or the different operating systems that they use, which is a huge plus. You definitely want to have that. I actually would rather have set bullet point 2 or bullet point 3, replace bullet point 1, but not a huge hill I'm going to die on. Typically speaking, and I'm just going to speak this really anecdotally for all internships, but tools and languages almost go first. Metrics and KPIs almost always go second. That's super interchangeable, not a hill I'm going to die on. The things that I will die on is that the things that go last in bullet points are things that have absolutely nothing to do with metrics, which are usually soft skills or side projects that you tend to work on. So now we move down to projects. This person has an amazing format. I love it. Programming languages and italics, bolded projects on the left-hand side. Kind of a super small nitpick. I kind of like the idea of the bolded project name, actually linking it to its respective GitHub. Not a huge hill I'm going to die on, because the person did link their GitHub at the very beginning. But someone once did ask in this chat, do recruiters click on GitHub links? And again, I'm going to be super real. We're very superficial recruiters, or recruiters are super superficial. If there was a link right here to look at it, we would click on it. But if it's not right here, I'm not going to scroll up to click on it. And I know that sounds really mean, but there are some recruiters who are like that. This person worked at Meta. That means the big size company's name was Meta. That's hilarious. Okay, we can skip this. Person used a MERN stack to work on an e-commerce web app. That's totally cool. Context before KPIs. So this is totally fine. I would bold the 20% time. I think you guys are sensing a theme. I'm not really criticizing the technology used. I'm just criticizing about how it's expressed. So same thing here, Python and natural language processing. 90% accuracy, awesome, but the context takes priority. So yeah, we're good there. If I absolutely have to take any criticism about this, is that I would probably want I would probably want one more Java project, but it's not a hill I'm gonna die on because Python's a pretty well accepted backend tech stack too. All right, and then finally leadership. If we could scroll down, please. Awesome. So, I'm stupid. I should have just scrolled down. School club, awesome. I personally don't. I probably wouldn't encourage anyone to do like a paragraph statement like this. When I think of leadership, think quantity over quality. Don't get me wrong, quality will always matter in any other context, but in terms of a resume and just getting like the brownie points of a high volume space like internships, you want to come off like you're doing a whole bunch of different things instead of doing like one thing insanely well, because you have your tech stacks to reflect that. Your leadership, a little bit vice versa. You want like different examples of different of leadership opportunities that you've kind of practiced. So that's my one thing I will kind of nudge on, but the actual example in this specific resume is actually pretty high quality. So I'm totally okay with it. I'd probably just bold the 180%. But overall, I'd probably give this resume like an 8 out of 10. So we are good.
So would it be a pass or like a fail?
Oh yeah, for me, if I was an early career recruiter, this would be a pass.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
this person gets brownie points for actually having natural language processing too. I would think like this person would do pretty well in an AI/ML internship, or like it like I don't know, like an emotional sentient space or something like cool like that. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, this person's really well balanced. He has a they have a MERN stack for front end, Java for back end, and then they can kind of get into data with Python and NLP, which is kind of cool. So pretty well balanced individual. Good job, person. Good job, Betty Cooper.
sounds good. So we move on to the next resume.
Yeah. All righty. All right, so full name. So, I understand the format. So yeah, just assume that the first four, just assume that the header is just hyperlinks. So totally okay with me. Education goes on the very top for internships and new grads. That makes sense. This person lists their GPA. Pretty awesome. Golden rule, as long as it's above 3.5, you should be good. I'll try not to parrot stuff that I said before, but honestly, I'm kind of dumb, so I kind of forgot what I just said 5 minutes ago. But just in case if I didn't say, beginning, month, and year don't really matter. The end year is the thing that matters most. Usually just say graduated, expected graduation in April 2025. That's more than fine. This person's tech stack is a little bit different than the previous person, and that doesn't mean like they're worse or anything. It's just definitely different. Oh no, they put React at the bottom. Okay, that's cool. I don't think I'm qualified to criticize someone's tech stack, but this person does have GCP and AWS, and Git, which is super cool. I think they do have the MERN stack, I think, except for Express. Okay, they have like 3/4. That's totally cool too. Python for backend, they don't have Java, not a big deal, totally cool. Everyone learns different tech stacks, not a big deal. Work experience first. So typically speaking, for students, I almost always recommend projects go first before work experience, just because you have more control with projects, you have less control with work experience. But with that said, not a huge hill I'm gonna die on. This person did it the opposite. Instead of technologies going first, they put it at the very bottom. Mostly a cosmetic thing, not a huge deal. I should probably read what they did for the internships just in case they couldn't do any KPIs. But the things that stand out with internship one is that this student doesn't have a lot of metrics or KPIs used except for bullet point 3, which is, who knows, maybe I don't know what your project was for like a couple of months, but if I had to give any criticism, if you could quantify your work or your impacts in any way, I would highly encourage to do so. And if you can't, then go ahead and move bullet point 3 to bullet point 2, and then use bullet point 1 to give context of your actual project. I do like your soft skills though, working with business logic, conducting analyses, all that good stuff. I think working cross-functional too, right? I think that's pretty cool. Oh wait, these aren't SWE internships. Okay, maybe that's why. Lead researcher. Can I skip this one? I don't know what research folks do. Led a research team in the AI project space for climate change. Worked with GCP, Python, PyTorch. Yeah, same thing. If there were any possible wiggle room to quantify any impacts that you've done, but like with before and after metrics, that would be awesome. And then finally, something I know, bamboo housing, full stack engineer. Oh, this one's pretty cool because this one doesn't have an intern title on it. So this one you should kind of double down on, right? Because if it's on an internship, this would give you the most data, which is kind of mean, I guess, if you don't have a lot of bullet points under it. So I would say that if you're going into SWE and you wanted to min-max like your resume points, I would actually move the full stack engineer bamboo housing to the very top and then elaborate more on that. And then do the vice versa if you're trying to go into data science or etc. I just realized I'm talking to the data science club. So maybe you do want to go to data science, who knows? Oh, actually, the person's data science internship at TD Bank is actually quite phenomenal. This person bolded all the metrics, acknowledged an award. Technologies are at the very bottom. Used object-oriented programming. That TD Bank, fuego, love it. This person has an NDA under the biotech internship. Completely respect that. Probably not too much to go around, so we can. Oh, and this person is hackathons. I'm gonna scroll down. I possibly could. Yeah, hackathons at the very bottom. Competing against 25 universities, and then they talked about a project that they worked on. My only red flag is that this particular person doesn't have projects, but this person did offset that with internships that do outweigh projects. So not a huge like hill to die on, I guess. Not a huge thing. I would say that this person probably wouldn't get any early career internships. So like internships that we would give to folks with little experience, but this person would definitely be a really strong contender for internships that we want people with like foundational experience to have. So like during third or fourth year, this person would do pretty well. Would I pass or fail this resume? Honestly, this is such a bad question because I would pass a lot of resumes. So I would say yes, full name here, whoever you are. Yeah, and I just want to be mindful of time. Are we good with everything? With questions being asked at
Yeah,
the
we
end?
can do one last resume and then I'm not sure if this meeting's gonna end, but if it does, we can just like move on to another one.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so we're about to go into some dangerous territory where this is definitely a resume that's a little bit prettier than the other two, which is not a bad thing. But again, as long as it's in a PDF file, you should be fine. But just a very small risk with using fancy templates. Just be a little bit wary. Header, completely fine. And they have in headlines what they're going into. Sweet intern, thank you. I'm very comfortable with that. For coursework, as long as they have OOP and DSA, that's all I really need. Graduation date, we don't have to go through this again. This person has Java, Python, C#. This person has MERN. This person has Docker, Kubernetes. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. This person also has cloud tech with AWS. That's pretty cool. All right, so after skills, there's almost always projects, unless the person has, actually almost always is really go projects before experience, but not, again, not a hill that I'm gonna die on. This person bolded all the technology they use. They bolded all the KPIs that they're gonna use. And I would say the only thing that is not clear is the project that is actually being worked on, but that could be because I don't have the technical literature to understand it. But if there is a bullet point to basically TLDR, what was the point of your campaign or the point of your internship stint, that should probably go to bullet point 1. You would probably also benefit from a, remember one of the bullet points I brought up earlier from the other two was like a soft bullet point about soft skills. You'd probably benefit from one of those. Again, it's all about balance, but nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with how you have it right now. Honestly, it's basically the same thing for company 2 and company 1. So I feel like I want to skip it. Person used a MERN stack to work on a user auth for CRUD-ops. I have no idea what CRUD-ops is. Which is, see, and this is a really good opportunity to kind of explain. Technical recruiters and university recruiters will not understand a lot of the technologies that are in front of you. So do not worry about kind of worrying about like whether something should be there or should not be on there. I'm telling you, these are things I'm not going to double down on. Person uses EC2 for housing, that's awesome, or hosting, that's awesome. Canvas API. I would say that the projects themselves are pretty high quality. And with respect to the two companies I've worked at, my only criticism is that I would probably replace the second project with something a little bit more back-end focused, with something less about, I'm not saying like it's an AWS like focused project, but like I want to see a more, I want to see a Java project basically, because my philosophy has always still been you should kind of play the market, and the market right now is very Java heavy, so you should have a Java project. And then activities, pretty dope. Led a team of 10, organized events, bolded sponsors, bolded speakers, bolded the number of people in said club, so we're good there too. I would also pass this resume. As you can clearly tell, if I was an internship recruiter, everyone would get an internship.
That would be amazing. You should be a university recruiter.
Absolutely, that's the plan. But yeah, I think this, I know I'm pretty over time, and I completely understand if people need to drop, but I'm more than happy to answer questions about anything you guys have, from anything I skipped and whatnot.
We actually have a lot of questions, so if you don't mind, we can start going through them.
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay, so the first one is, do coursework and GPA add important weightage to the resume? And how important is graduation date?
Can you repeat that one more time?
How important do coursework and GPA add important weightage to the resume? And do we have to add graduation date? I mean, how important is graduation date?
Graduation date is important because our internships are segregated by what status you are as a student. For example, in America, our internships are very, very publicly well known that they're not open to freshmen and sophomores. So your graduation date tells me, because obviously I work backwards, what kind of matriculated student you are. So that's why I don't care about your start date. I care more about your end date, because I use that to base everything off of. So that's why it is required. GPA sometimes matters. Some companies definitely do ask for GPAs. Other companies are a little bit more open-minded and don't really ask for it. The golden rule has always been, if it's on your resume, it has to be 3.5 or above. There's like, it's not a hill to like, it's not something you can really argue about. You can't put a bad GPA on your resume. And if you know, again, life happens, it's totally okay. If you don't have the best GPA in the world, you just simply omit it. But yeah, typically speaking, GPAs do indicate to recruiters that they're only able to work with students with a certain grade point average. And even no matter how hard they try, they can't work with someone with like, I don't know, like a 1.8 or a 2.4, like as much as I would want to, just because of company policy. They want to make sure that the internships are going to folks who are doing academically well. There's a lot of leeway to that, but I just want to keep things pretty superficial.
Sounds good. There's two related questions. To get a co-op in spring 2023, do you think it's too late to start applying in winter 2022? And a similar question is it too late to start applying for summer internships now?
I'll answer it backwards. Is it too late to apply to summer internships now? Kind of, because fall internships are technically public for some of the companies. If you use my internship tracker, that's basically what I'm basing it off of. For summer 2023, it's almost always been September is like your golden month. October is like your backup month, and November is like you're probably gonna be at the very end. But to caveat that, every company operates a lot differently, and there's you'll 100% not get accepted if you don't apply at all. So, and it does not go against you if you apply and you get rejected. So you might as well apply. So I just want to throw that out there. And then to get a co-op in spring 2023, does spring go before summer? I forgot. Yeah, spring goes before summer, right? Yeah, winters.
But I think it's for us, spring and summer is like the same. It's May, June. Like
Okay.
starting May.
Okay. Do you think it's too late to start applying in winter 2022? About 4 months ago. Yeah, I feel like I'm not understanding the timeline, but if it's spring, no matter what, if it's spring 2023, it's not too late. It is only late for summer 2023, if I understand what you're asking me. Okay.
Oh, okay. The next question is, does ATS automatically reject the students with later graduation year when the job post specifically looks for junior or senior students?
Do ATS, well, there can't be anything later than a junior or senior student, right, with graduation year?
No, I think
Is
like if the person is a freshman or a sophomore, does the ATS can just reject them if they're
oh, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Because if you graduate earlier, you'd be older than, yeah, that apps, yep, see, I'm brain fart. Does it automatically reject you? Technically, no, but will you get rejected? Probably yes. The ATS are most ATSs are configured to auto reject based on immigration, region. Yeah, it's basically those are like the biggest auto rejections. The grades are not something that are easily like configured to, I guess. It's not like it's a checkbox. Actually, no, that's a trick question. Microsoft actually has a checkbox to ask you what grade you're in. So if you do you voluntarily self-identify as a freshman, sophomore, yeah, you're probably gonna get self-rejected or quickly rejected.
The next question is, do you think having differently colored headings / sections is advantageous or not so much?
As long as it's in a PDF and as long as it opens fine, technically it won't be like disadvantage to you. Again, to the philosophy of that recruiters only look at resumes for a short amount of time, it wouldn't be the it wouldn't be the worst idea to have differently colored sections. It's just don't go over the top and make it very graphic-y, illustrative, creative-y. Don't make it too loud, basically.
Sounds good. The next question is also, would you be able to recommend types of projects / resume content for those interested in data science internships?
I would not be able to, because for data science internships, the thing that we value the absolute most are data visualization. So like something like with Power BI or Tableau or BI or something like that, that'd be pretty awesome. And data chops. So SQL ability and Python ability. Any projects that allow you or is able to help you show off your Python skills or your Tableau or BI, then you're in good shape. But what kind of projects? I don't know. You're talking to a guy that gave a pass to a Pokemon project. I'm probably the worst person to ask this question to.
The next question is, I know that large companies such as Google, Amazon, etc., have a lot of different projects going on. How would a student be able to tell if there is a project that would fit their niche / specialization? For example, how would one know if Google has any roles for bioinformaticians or biostatisticians?
Great question. So with the understanding that you're looking to apply into these companies in a intern capacity, you would not be able to find a very niche internship like this unless it's publicly posted on their careers page. So the first answer is, if there is a niche of this, it will be posted publicly on their careers page. The second thing is, if you're thinking about going into these things as an intern, and it's not on their careers page, then very likely then you need to have a special amount of experience or skills to apply to the full grad role. The third part is, if you're trying to get into a department that works on bioinformations or biostats or in like biohealth or telemedicine or anything in that field, and you want to work there as a SWE or something like a data scientist or something, then you would need to pass the fungible SWE internship or the fungible DS internship or whatever it is, pass those interviews, and then get team matched to that org that works with telemedicine, biotech, whatever. Those are the three most realistic ways to get into that field.
We'll do 4 more questions because it's already 7:40, so we're already 10 time. If all my projects are done as a part of my internship, should I keep it in the experience section and have no project section, or should we take those out and move it to the project section?
As long as you're not violating an NDA, then yeah, you should have freedom to put it into the experience section. That's kind of one of the cool parts about getting internships is that once you do, they basically double down because they give you projects to work on and you can put it on your resume. It's like two birds with one stone.
The next question is, should school clubs have their own individual section, or can we just put it under experience?
School clubs should go under leadership and extracurriculars because that in itself should be in its own section.
Why should we put projects before work experience? I just want to know the reason.
The reason is because most students, like typically speaking across the board, have more freedom to decide what kind of projects, how many projects, and how high quality projects they will have. Therefore, it's more valuable it's a better like reflection of their skill and their, is the word capabilities versus work experience, because as I mentioned before, no one gets dealt the same cards in college. Everyone has a different story, and some people don't have the same amount of internships or opportunities, so they have less freedom and less control over that. It is more appealing to an early career recruiter to see projects. Okay, it's more appealing to an early career recruiter to see internships, but if there's only like a limited amount, or if you're not a student who is, received internships, then you need to prioritize projects before that. But it's my personal philosophy that projects should go before work experience. But once you have more, there is one resume that we just reviewed that has way more internships than a common student. And that could be because you're from Waterloo Co-op, makes sense. Then that's okay to not do projects or to not prioritize projects. Then that would be okay. But as an American, go USA, we definitely have less on average internships than you guys do. I think I looked this up once at Amazon, but like most new grad applicants have about 2 internships.
Wow, that's comparatively sounds so less compared to like a Waterloo Co-op.
That's what I'm saying. I made a post about Waterloo like 6 months ago. I was so scared for you guys. Your co-op program is insane.
The next is more US-based jobs. I'll just ask all of them together. If I want to apply for a US job, does it put me at an disadvantage if I live at Waterloo?
Hey Mingo, good morning. Yes, it definitely puts you at a disadvantage unless the role is open to international relocation. This is going to be a huge topic, and I don't think I'll have enough time to explain this, but do not have, like, there are a lot of outs to this role. One, you can apply to the Canadian counterpart for that company and then transfer to America, and that's super easy. Two, the visa that you need to apply to America with respect to your STEM background is called a TN1 visa, which is based off your degree or education or field of study, one of those 3. And it's contingent based off the work that you have, and it's so much easier than an H1B, and I hate H1B visas. But yeah, it's pretty easy to like get into an American company from Canada so long as you kind of follow a different set of procedure. And then third is that you apply to a role that is open to international relocation. Most often than not, new grad roles don't have this quality to them. It's only roles that are super niche. So like, let's say Amazon Music is looking to hire like a mid-level dev, then they're going to be like, okay, we need a pretty special person to be this mid-level dev. So then they'll be open to relocation. But if you're applying to a new grad role that's fungible and there's a team matching process to it, very likely it's not going to consider international relocation.
If I'm a permanent resident in Canada, the answer to are you legally authorized to work in US is no, right?
The answer will be no unless you already have dual citizenship, a TN1 visa, or any type of permission to work in the States. But again, we have Canadian counterpart to our internships for most F500 and most FAANG companies.
Another question is, along the same lines, are US roles more limited to US students, or are Canadian students equally as likely to get a US internship as a US student?
For internships, the US roles prioritize domestic candidates, and no, Canadian students would not be equal to US students in respect to these student internships based in America. But one more time, I just want to throw this out there. There are Canadian counterparts for these internships, and I'm hinting strongly towards Google and Amazon, Microsoft and Amazon. I know for sure that there are Canadian counterparts to those.
So there's the last question. What if I'm thinking about graduating in 2025, maybe taking off terms or additional co-ops, but I can easily graduate in 2024? Should I put my graduation year as 2025 or 2024?
You have to put your graduation year what you expect it to be. So even if you change your mind later, it's not a hill that you're going to die on. As long as you can ethically say that you intended to graduate at that date, but at the time of submission, then you're completely fine. Do not sweat about. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a little bit kind of like a paperwork fire, but like you shouldn't be held responsible for that. That's more on the adults.
That's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Yeah,
we should definitely have another session where you go more into detail about interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my fault for coming late, so that's my bad, guys. Sorry to probably kill another hour of your life. But no, it was lovely talking. I love stuff like this, and this was pretty fun. Is it okay if I plug my LinkedIn if anyone wants to talk?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can link it on this and we can put it up as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go take a shower and live my best life. I'll catch you guys later.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.